I'm Jim Hegedus. I'm pastor at the First Presbyterian Church in Jackson, Michigan, and I'm here to talk about unaccompanied refugee minors and how we have become involved in this ministry in welcoming them and welcoming the refugee and taking them to our hearts. About 3 years ago, we were approached by Lutheran Social Services of Michigan. And there had been a house that was in downtown Jackson that was originally supposed to be for girls who had been sexually assaulted. The house is full up with boys, unaccompanied refugee minors ages 14 through 18. When this first batch of boys came in, some of them were going to turn 18 years old in less than a year. And which meant that they would not have their immigration status. With our new administration in 2016, originally immigration would take about 6 months. Now it takes about 2 years. These young men are on their best behavior. They've been vetted in 9 different ways to Sunday. They are officially foster children. They are refugee foster children. But what has happened is that we did not anticipate that they would remain without an immigration status for as long as they have. And they were going to turn 18. So the group of us that originally said, let's support this 14 to 18-year-old refugee house in Jackson. We've got to do something else like this somewhere else for the boys who have aged out. And so the boys who have aged out now live in a house in Okemos that's a parsonage with the Faith Lutheran Church, and they call their house the aged outhouse, okay? I mean, it makes sense if you're AGED-OUT, house, but it's the aged outhouse. We have volunteer attorneys that work through LIRS, Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. And they volunteer their time. This is their expertise in law. And they will walk these boys through until they get some kind of status. There are about 3 different statuses along the way, and I really am not prepared to speak about that because there's a lot of alphabet soup involved with that. Once these boys, young men, receive status, then they're free to leave the house because they're over 18 and they no longer have to be concerned about being deported. One of the things I failed to mention is that once they turn 18, there's 3 options. One is they can be deported back to their country of origin, which in many times is a certain death sentence because the boys who come from Guatemala and Honduras fled those countries because the gangs there are pretty brutal and violent, and they recruit young men, and they literally were running away for their own lives. So they can be deported, they can be detained. They can either have an ankle bracelet put on them or detained in another detainment center, which translates to the jail in Battle Creek for our area in Jackson and Okemos. Or a third arrangement can be offered. They can either be under the care of a family who will care for them, or in a housing situation, which is what we've opted for. Not everyone was in favor of this. And there were a number of people who said, oh, this Jackson house, downtown Jackson, is a school for young terrorists. Someone actually said that. And I said, well, I wouldn't be so quick to draw that conclusion. they have been vetted, and they have been vetted by the rules according to the United Nations. The United Nations sets up guidelines on how immigrants are to come to our country, and what we can ask and what we need to make clear. Now, whether we follow those, whether our present president and his administration wants to follow those, that's up to those persons. There were a few folks who said, well, it could be a school for terrorists. There was somebody who said, well, how come we're taking care of these people who are coming outside of our country when we can't even take care of our own veterans? And my response was, well, Jesus calls us to do both. We are to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, and our neighbors are all over the world.